The night was still, but the air crackled with tension. In a quiet suburban neighborhood just outside the city limits, a shadow moved past the street lamps, unseen by the families asleep behind locked doors. A young girl, no older than 10, sat huddled in her bedroom corner, her small body trembling. Behind the closed door, the laughter of the adults masked the darkness that filled that home, a darkness no one outside suspected. But one soul sensed it. Ace, a German Shepherd canine with the local police department, lay alert in the back seat of the cruiser. His keen nose twitched, catching a faint scent, a subtle, almost imperceptible signal that something was terribly wrong inside the house across the street. His handler, Officer Reynolds, noticed Ace's sudden focus, his ears pricking up and low growls stirring in his throat. "Something's up, boy," Reynolds murmured, eyes narrowing as they watched the house. "Let's see what you've got." Ace wasn't just any dog. Trained for years to detect everything from explosives to missing persons, he carried the weight of countless lives on his shoulders. But tonight, it wasn't a bomb or a criminal he was tracking. It was a silent cry for help from a child trapped in a nightmare. Reynolds pulled the cruiser slowly down the block, Ace's nose working over the cracked pavement, catching tiny hints of fear and pain. Scents hidden beneath the ordinary smells of lawnmowers and fresh-cut grass. The neighbors were unaware. To them, this was just another quiet street with happy families. But Ace knew better. Over the past few weeks, police had received several vague tips about the Foster family living at number 42 Crestwood Lane. Nothing concrete, nothing that could justify a full investigation. The girl, Emily, was new to the system, placed with this family after her biological parents' rights were terminated. To the outside world, she was safe, cared for, protected. But Ace's instincts told a different story. As the night deepened, Reynolds and Ace parked a few houses down. They watched the house carefully, waiting for a sign. Then faint sounds, the crack of a door closing, a stifled sob, a whispered plea. Ace's growl deepened. There was no mistaking it. Reynolds reached for his radio, speaking in low tones. "Dispatch, we're investigating a possible welfare check at 42 Crestwood. Request backup. Possible child in distress." While officers responded, a local businessman named Michael Carter happened to be driving home nearby. Michael was well known in town, a self-made millionaire with a reputation for philanthropy and a quiet but fierce passion for child advocacy. Years ago, he'd set up a foundation dedicated to protecting children from abuse and neglect, funding foster care programs and legal battles that often went overlooked. That night, through a community alert system tied to local police reports, Michael received word of the possible welfare check. His interest piqued. This wasn't the first time Ace had been involved in such cases. He had seen firsthand how canine units like Ace's made all the difference. Minutes later, more cruisers arrived. Officers approached the house cautiously, knocking firmly on the door. A stern-faced woman answered, claiming everything was fine. But the officers weren't convinced. Reynolds motioned for Ace to work closer. The dog's nose led them toward the back of the house, near the garage. Ace barked sharply, pawing at the door. Suddenly, a small figure peeked from a slightly ajar basement window. Emily's wide eyes filled with fear and confusion. She quickly pulled back out of sight. Ace's bark softened into a gentle whine. "Hey, kiddo," Reynolds said softly. "We're here to help." As the officers prepared to take further action, Michael arrived, his presence calming yet commanding. He introduced himself, offering support and assuring the family of the legal process ahead. His foundation would cover any costs related to care or legal fees. This moment, quiet but charged, was the beginning of a long, difficult journey. But thanks to Ace's keen senses and Michael's determination, Emily's silent warning had finally been heard. Subscribe call placed naturally here. If you believe every child deserves a chance to be safe and heard, make sure to hit that subscribe button for Brave Animals, where heroes come in all shapes, sizes, and breeds. Join us as we share incredible stories of courage, hope, and rescue from the front lines. The days following were a blur of interviews, home visits, and legal paperwork. The Foster family maintained their innocence, presenting themselves as loving caretakers. But behind closed doors, the truth was far darker. Emily's school teachers had noticed her withdrawal and bruises but struggled to get a clear picture. Social workers had made visits but were often met with carefully rehearsed stories. It was Ace's unique ability to detect what humans couldn't see that pushed the case forward. One afternoon, as Reynolds and Michael reviewed the evidence, Emily sat quietly in the corner of a safe room, a small sanctuary provided by the foundation. Slowly, she began to trust the adults around her, her voice timid but growing stronger. Michael promised her a new beginning, a life where she could be a kid again, free from fear. Back at the precinct, Ace was celebrated as more than a police dog. He was a lifeline. His work not only saved a life but shone a light on a foster care system struggling to protect its most vulnerable. For Officer Reynolds, this case was a reminder of why he did this job. The small moments, the silent signals, the unseen truths that dogs like Ace uncovered. Emily's journey to healing had just begun, but one thing was clear. She was no longer alone. The days that followed Emily's rescue were a whirlwind of activity, but none of it felt real to her. She had been moved to a safe house miles away from the neighborhood where she had lived, where the sun seemed to shine a little brighter and the air smelled fresher. Yet inside, a heaviness clung to her chest, a weight built from years of fear and silence. Officer Reynolds visited often. Every time he came, Emily's eyes flickered with a mixture of curiosity and caution. She wasn't used to people who showed kindness without expectation, especially adults in uniforms. But with Reynolds and Ace nearby, she started to feel a little safer. The local community was buzzing with the news. The story of the canine police dog who had helped uncover abuse inside a foster home was everywhere. On the news, in social media, and at neighborhood gatherings. Michael Carter, the millionaire philanthropist who had stepped in to support Emily in the investigation, had become a quiet but powerful force behind the scenes. Michael wasn't the kind of man to seek attention, but he knew this case needed resources and awareness more than anything else. His foundation had worked on child welfare issues for years, but Emily's case had struck a nerve. A reminder that even in towns like theirs, shadows could hide where no one expected. Reynolds and Michael met often at the precinct and at the foundation office. They pored over files, reports, and witness statements, trying to piece together exactly what had happened in Emily's former home. The Foster family's story was full of contradictions, their carefully crafted image slowly unraveling under scrutiny. The Foster parents had passed every background check and inspection. They had smiles for the outside world and a house that looked perfect on paper. But the truth was hidden behind closed doors, a truth Emily hadn't yet been able to fully explain. At school, Emily was enrolled in a new program tailored for kids who had experienced trauma. The counselors worked gently with her, knowing that trust wouldn't come overnight. She kept mostly to herself, avoiding the playground and the noisy lunchroom, preferring the quiet corners where she could watch but not be seen. One afternoon, a social worker named Ms. Harper came to visit. She was warm and patient, the kind of person who seemed to understand the unspoken. Sitting with Emily in a cozy room decorated with soft colors and stuffed animals, she gently asked questions. Nothing too direct, just enough to let Emily feel heard without pressure. "You're safe here," Ms. Harper said softly. "No one will hurt you anymore." Emily's small nod was all the answer she could manage. The words felt like a promise she wanted to believe. Meanwhile, back at the police department, Reynolds was growing frustrated. The investigation was hitting roadblocks. The Foster family's attorney was skilled, firing back with legal maneuvers and delaying tactics. Evidence was hard to come by. Emily's fear had kept many of the details locked away. But Reynolds had one advantage. Ace, the dog, had proven time and again that his senses could uncover what human eyes missed. During a supervised visit to the old home with the search warrant, Ace had sniffed out hidden rooms and locked cabinets. His persistent pawing had led officers to secret compartments and discarded items, pieces of a puzzle that slowly revealed the foster parents' cruelty. One day, Michael joined Reynolds for a visit to the precinct. He had arranged for a special fund to support the case, offering legal resources and psychological support for Emily. His voice was calm but firm as he spoke with the detective. "Emily deserves the best chance we can give her," Michael said. "No stone left unturned." Reynolds nodded. "It's going to be a tough fight. The family's got good lawyers, and the foster care system isn't always on our side. But with you backing us, we're stronger." Michael smiled faintly. "Sometimes it takes more than law enforcement. It takes people who care enough to keep pushing." As the weeks passed, Emily began to show small signs of healing. She laughed quietly during art therapy sessions and even started to write stories about places where children were safe and free. Each word was a step away from the nightmare she had known. Ace, ever patient, seemed to sense her progress. The dog spent time sitting quietly nearby during sessions, offering silent comfort. The bond between Emily and Ace grew, a symbol of trust slowly forming between two souls who had both known hardship. Yet beneath the surface, the shadows remained. Emily's story hinted at more than just the foster parents' cruelty. There were whispers of others, people involved in a larger web of neglect and exploitation. Police quietly investigated leads, careful not to expose the girl to more trauma. Community support was swelling. Volunteers rallied around the cause, donations poured in, and local businesses partnered with Michael's foundation to raise awareness. Events were held to educate families about signs of abuse and the importance of speaking up. One evening, Reynolds and Michael sat together reviewing recent findings. The detective looked weary but determined. "We're on to something bigger," Reynolds said. "The foster parents aren't acting alone. There's a network, but it's well hidden." Michael leaned back. "That's why stories like Emily's matter. They shine a light where darkness thrives." Emily, meanwhile, was learning to reclaim her voice. During a family counseling session, she hesitated, then whispered about moments of kindness from a neighbor she had once trusted. The revelation opened a new path for investigators and therapists alike. Her healing journey wasn't linear. Some days were harder than others. Nightmares came and memories sometimes overwhelmed her. But with every sunrise, she edged closer to a future she could choose. Michael often visited, not just as a benefactor, but as a friend. His presence was steady, a reminder that there were people fighting for children like Emily every day. Ace, too, remained a guardian. The dog's story was becoming well known, inspiring other departments to invest in canine units trained for child welfare cases. He was more than a police dog, he was a hero with a heart. As the investigation deepened, the legal team prepared for a challenging battle ahead. Michael's foundation funded expert witnesses and therapy programs to ensure Emily's needs came first. Despite the obstacles, hope grew stronger. The shadows behind closed doors were slowly being pushed back by courage, compassion, and the relentless pursuit of justice. Emily's story was far from over, but she was no longer alone in the fight. The community had rallied, and with Ace and Michael standing by her side, the promise of a safer tomorrow was within reach. The air inside the police precinct was thick with tension. For weeks, the case had dragged. Legal battles, dead ends, and whispered rumors swirling just out of reach. But today, something was different. Officer Partridge sat across the table from Detective Lacey, their eyes locked on the folder thick with evidence. The most recent forensic reports, the notes from home visits, and the carefully logged observations from Ace's search inside the foster home all pointed to one undeniable fact. Emily's story was real, and the abuse went deeper than anyone had suspected. But what truly shifted the investigation was what happened last Thursday. That morning, Reynolds had taken Ace back to the house on Crestwood Lane, this time under a fresh search warrant. The judge had granted it after the preliminary evidence and testimony from Emily and social workers. Ace, keen-nosed and tireless, was ready to work. As they approached the front door, Ace's tail stiffened, his gaze fixed on the darkened porch. Reynolds felt the familiar pulse of adrenaline. The dog's instincts were rarely wrong. Inside, the house smelled stale, with a faint odor of bleach masking something sour. Ace's paws patted softly over the hardwood floors, his nose twitching rapidly as he traced a scent trail through the rooms. Then, in the dimly lit basement, a place the foster family had forbidden anyone to enter, Ace stopped abruptly. His body went rigid, hackles raised, as he pawed at a loose floorboard near the back wall. Reynolds knelt, shining his flashlight over the floor. Underneath the board lay a small wooden box, dusty and forgotten. Inside, wrapped in an old, tattered blanket, were photographs, notes, and a few worn toys, evidence Emily hadn't spoken about but had left as silent cries for help. The photos showed bruises and cuts, the notes scribbled in a shaky hand, desperate messages from a child trapped in pain. This was the breakthrough the team had been waiting for. Detective Lacey called in the evidence team immediately. The room buzzed as officers gathered around, the weight of the discovery sinking in. The foster parents' carefully maintained facade was beginning to crack. Meanwhile, Michael Carter received the news just as he was leaving his office. He felt a surge of hope but knew this was only the first step in a long fight. Back at the precinct, Michael and Reynolds strategized late into the evening. The evidence was clear, but the foster family's attorneys were formidable. The legal battle would be fierce. Michael looked over the documents, tapping a pen thoughtfully. "We need expert witnesses, pediatricians, psychologists, to explain the trauma and confirm the abuse. and we have to make sure Emily's voice is heard without breaking her. Reynolds nodded. And we'll need protection for her during the trial. The Foster family won't go down without a fight. Michael was already thinking ahead. His foundation had contacts, professionals experienced in handling sensitive cases involving children. He promised to fund everything Emily needed, from therapy to security. The next day, a coordinated effort began. Medical experts examined Emily, confirming the physical and emotional abuse. Social workers worked gently to support her, carefully documenting progress without pressuring her. Ace continued to be a steady presence. His calm demeanor helped Emily find moments of peace. She would often sit beside him during therapy, stroking his fur, a small comfort in a world that had been harsh. Meanwhile, the foster parents' house was under intense scrutiny. Forensic teams combed every corner, looking for additional clues. The community's eyes were on the case, waiting for justice. But the Foster family didn't stay silent. Their lawyers filed motions to discredit the evidence, claiming mishandling and bias. They painted Emily as an unreliable witness, suggesting her trauma made her memories faulty. Michael and Reynolds knew these were standard tactics but remained undeterred. One afternoon, Emily's attorney arranged for a supervised visit with the foster parents, a courtroom requirement to show goodwill. The meeting was brief and tense. Emily sat quietly, eyes downcast. The foster mother's gaze was cold, the father distant. There were no apologies, no admissions, just silence. That night, Emily had nightmares, shadows dancing across her room, echoes of whispered threats. But she clung to one thought: Ace was nearby, ready to protect. Weeks later, the trial date was set. The courtroom would become a battleground where Emily's story, the foster family's lies, and the community's hopes collided. In preparation, Michael organized a public awareness campaign. Articles, interviews, and community meetings highlighted the importance of child protection and the role of K-9 units in law enforcement. Ace's story in particular captured hearts. A police dog who had sniffed out the truth and saved a child became a symbol of hope and justice. Children visited the precinct to meet Ace, and local schools held assemblies teaching about abuse prevention. The campaign was more than PR. It was a call to action. Michael wanted to ensure that cases like Emily's didn't slip through the cracks again. At home, Emily continued her healing. Therapy sessions helped her put words to feelings long buried. Slowly, she learned to trust again, in adults and friends, in herself. Her favorite moments were quiet afternoons spent with Ace. The dog's steady presence was a balm, reminding her she was not alone. One day, after a particularly difficult session, Emily looked up at Reynolds. "Will it be okay?" she asked softly. Reynolds smiled, kneeling beside her. "We're going to make sure of it. You're safe now, and we're all here for you." The path ahead was daunting, but the breakthrough had set everything in motion. The truth was out, and justice was within reach. As the community rallied behind Emily and the legal teams prepared for trial, one thing was clear. Thanks to a determined K-9 police dog and a millionaire who refused to give up, a young girl's silent cry had finally been heard. The morning sun filtered through the dusty blinds of the old Crestwood Lane house, casting long, thin lines of light across the cracked hardwood floor. For years, that house had been a fortress of silence and shadows, hiding secrets that no one wanted to hear. But today, it would finally be torn open. Inside the local police department, officers prepared for the operation that could change everything. Officer Reynolds and Detective Lacey reviewed every detail. Ace, the German Shepherd, stood alert beside them, his ears perked and eyes sharp. Today, the dog wasn't just a partner. He was the key to unlocking a child's nightmare. The search warrant had been granted after weeks of painstaking investigation. The evidence, the photos, the notes, the testimonies had painted a clear picture of abuse and neglect. The foster family's facade was cracked wide open. Backup arrived, ready for the raid. Social workers and medical personnel were on standby, prepared to provide immediate care once the child was found. Michael Carter had personally ensured all resources were in place: funding for emergency care, legal aid, and a secure safe house. Reynolds took a deep breath as they approached the front door. Ace stepped forward, nose to the ground, leading the way. The officers moved quickly but carefully, aware that the child's safety was paramount. The door creaked open under the officers' pressure. The stale air inside smelled of neglect and fear. Rooms once hidden from prying eyes were laid bare, a testament to years of secrets and suffering. In the basement, behind a locked door, they found her. Emily. She was curled into a corner, small and fragile, her eyes wide with terror, but flickering with a glimmer of hope. The bruises on her arms and legs told a story her words hadn't yet formed. Her trembling hands clutched a faded doll, her only comfort in a world that had been cruel. Ace moved slowly toward her, tail low but wagging gently. Emily reached out a tentative hand, fingers brushing the dog's fur. For the first time in a long time, a flicker of trust sparked. Reynolds knelt beside her, her voice soft and steady. "You're safe now, Emily. We're here to help." Tears welled in Emily's eyes as officers moved in to secure the scene. Medical personnel immediately began their assessment, offering blankets and quiet reassurances. The foster parents had been arrested without incident, their shock evident but hollow. The town's whispers were already growing. The betrayal of trust, the failure of the system, the long road ahead. Emily was transported carefully to the hospital, where doctors confirmed the extent of her injuries. More importantly, psychologists began the slow, delicate work of unraveling the trauma. Michael met her at this hospital, a calm presence amid the chaos. He spoke softly to Emily, promising a future where she would be loved and safe. His foundation would provide whatever she needed: therapy, education, a new home. Emily clung to that promise, the first real hope she'd ever known. Meanwhile, the legal team prepared to file charges against the foster family. The evidence was overwhelming, thanks in large part to Ace's discovery and the dedicated work of the investigators. The courtroom battle would be intense, but justice was finally within reach. In the weeks that followed, Emily settled into the safe house funded by Michael's foundation. The walls were painted in soft pastels, sunlight pouring in through large windows. There were toys, books, and a small garden where Emily could play without fear. Therapy sessions were a part of her routine, sometimes painful but always necessary. With each visit, she learned to name her feelings and face her fears. Ace visited often, a silent guardian. The bond between them grew stronger, a living reminder that trust could be rebuilt. The community responded with overwhelming support. Volunteers offered tutoring, donations poured in, and local schools hosted awareness events. Emily's story was a catalyst, shining a light on the dark corners of the foster care system. Michael continued to work tirelessly behind the scenes. He met with lawmakers, pushing for reforms to protect children and improve oversight. His foundation expanded programs that train canine units to assist in welfare checks, recognizing their unique ability to detect danger where humans might fail. One afternoon, Emily sat in the garden with Reynolds and Michael. The three of them watched butterflies dance among the flowers. For a moment, the weight of her past seemed to lift, replaced by something new: possibility. Michael smiled gently. "You're safe here, Emily, and we're not going anywhere." Reynolds nodded. "We'll make sure nothing like this ever happens to you again." Despite the progress, Emily's journey was far from over. Nightmares still visited, memories sometimes overwhelmed her, and the scars, both visible and invisible, would take time to heal. But she was no longer alone. Her story had awakened a community, brought together unlikely heroes, and proved that even in the darkest places, hope could shine through. As Emily took her first tentative steps toward a new life, Ace rested nearby, ever vigilant. The dog's quiet courage had saved her from a fate many never escaped. And thanks to the relentless determination of people like Michael and Reynolds, Emily's escape from darkness was just the beginning of a brighter tomorrow. The courthouse was quiet that morning, but inside the tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. For Emily, walking through those tall doors meant facing a past she had tried so hard to bury. But this time she wasn't alone. A community stood behind her, and a fierce determination burned in the hearts of those fighting for her justice. Officer Reynolds, sitting quietly near the back, glanced at Ace, who rested calmly at his feet. The canine had been part of this journey from the start, a silent witness to the truth and an unlikely hero. Today, Ace's presence was a reminder of how far they'd come. Michael Carter paced near the front row, his face unreadable but resolute. As a man used to solving problems with resources and influence, he knew this case was about much more than money. It was about a young girl reclaiming her life. The courtroom slowly filled. Reporters scribbled notes, local advocates whispered encouragements, and Emily's new foster family sat nearby, a source of steady support. The trial began with opening statements. The prosecutor laid out the grim details: neglect, physical abuse, emotional torment. Photographs and medical reports painstakingly collected, painted a stark picture. But it wasn't just evidence. It was Emily's story, told through carefully chosen words and with the unwavering support of professionals who had helped her find her voice. Emily's attorney spoke with gentle conviction. This isn't just about punishment. It's about ensuring no child has to suffer in silence again. The defense tried to dismantle the case, arguing inconsistencies and casting doubt on Emily's memories. But the truth was stronger. Testimonies from social workers, medical experts, and even Ace's handler built an unshakable narrative. When Reynolds took the stand, his voice was steady as he described the critical role Ace played, how the dog had sensed danger where humans had failed and had helped locate the evidence that changed everything. Ace lay quietly nearby, eyes bright but calm, as if understanding the gravity of the moment. The judge listened carefully, occasionally taking notes. The community waited with bated breath. Throughout the trial, Emily remained guarded but brave. She clung to the support of her therapist and her new foster family. Each day in court was a step closer to reclaiming her childhood. Outside the courtroom, Michael worked tirelessly. He met with lawmakers and child welfare organizations, pushing for systemic changes, better screening for foster families, increased funding for support services, and expanded training for canine units and welfare investigations. His foundation sponsored workshops and public forums, turning Emily's case into a catalyst for reform. Meanwhile, Emily's healing journey progressed. Therapy sessions grew deeper, helping her unravel years of trauma and rebuild trust. With each breakthrough, she gained strength. One afternoon, after a particularly intense session, Emily sat quietly with Reynolds and Michael in the foundation's garden. "I want to help other kids like me," she said softly, her eyes shining with a new kind of hope. Michael smiled, pride evident. "And you will. You're already making a difference just by being brave." Reynolds added, "Your story is helping change lives. It's why we fight." As the trial neared its end, the foster parents' fate rested in the hands of the jury. The evidence was overwhelming, and the community's support was undeniable. When the verdict came, the courtroom fell silent. Guilty on all counts, justice had been served. But for Emily, the real victory was freedom. Freedom from fear, from silence, from the shadows that had haunted her. Her story became a beacon, inspiring others to speak out and seek help. Michael's foundation expanded its mission, funding programs that combine the power of trained canine units with community outreach and legal advocacy. Ace became a local legend, visiting schools and events to raise awareness about child abuse and the importance of vigilance. Emily continued to grow in her new home, safe, loved, and surrounded by people who believed in her. Though scars remained, both seen and unseen, she was no longer defined by her past. She was a survivor, and thanks to a determined canine police dog, a dedicated officer, a compassionate millionaire, and a community that refused to look away, justice and healing had finally found her. Sunlight spilled gently across the windows of Emily's new bedroom, painting the walls in soft hues of gold and warmth. For the first time in what felt like forever, the mornings held promise instead of fear. The small house she now called home was filled with laughter, sunlight, and the kind of quiet peace she hadn't known was possible. Months had passed since the courtroom drama, the intense therapy sessions, and the tireless efforts of those who had fought for her. Emily was no longer the frightened girl hiding in shadows, but a young survivor beginning to carve out her own future. Her days were filled with school, new friendships, and moments of simple joy, baking cookies, chasing butterflies in the backyard, and quiet afternoons reading her favorite books. Ace, the German shepherd, who had been her steadfast protector, was never far. The dog had become her shadow, her guardian, and her friend. Officer Reynolds often stopped by, bringing stories from the precinct and updates on the reforms inspired by Emily's case. He watched with pride as she blossomed, a living testament to resilience. Michael Carter, too, remained a constant presence, quietly supporting programs aimed at preventing abuse and improving foster care systems. His foundation had grown, funding canine units across the state and launching educational campaigns that reached schools and communities alike. But for Emily, the most important change was the love and stability she now had. Her foster family embraced her with open arms, helping her heal one day at a time. One afternoon, Emily sat on the porch steps watching Ace play in the yard. She smiled softly, the weight of her past lifting with every wag of the dog's tail. "Do you remember the first day you came here, Ace?" she asked, her voice filled with wonder. Ace tilted his head, as if understanding. "You saved me," she said, reaching out to scratch behind his ears. Not just that day, but every day since. As the seasons changed, so did Emily. She took part in community events, sharing her story when she felt ready, inspiring others to speak out. Her voice, once silenced by fear, had become a beacon of hope. The town had changed too. Awareness grew, and the foster care system saw improvements. More children like Emily found safe homes and caring hearts. The impact of one brave girl, a determined police dog, and a community refusing to look away rippled far beyond Crestwood Lane. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Emily sat with Michael and Reynolds at a local park, surrounded by friends and supporters. Michael raised his glass of lemonade. "To new beginnings," he said warmly. Reynolds smiled. "To courage." Emily looked at the faces around her, the people who had fought for her, stood by her, and helped her reclaim her life. "To family," she said softly. The road ahead wasn't without challenges. Healing is a journey, not a destination. But Emily was ready. She had found strength in the kindness of strangers, the loyalty of a date, and the power of justice. As the stars began to twinkle overhead, Emily whispered a silent thanks to those who believed in her when she could barely believe in herself. Thank you for following Emily's story. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey of courage, hope, and healing. Emily's story is a powerful reminder that even in the darkest times there is light, sometimes found in the loyalty of a canine police dog, the determination of a community, and the strength within a single brave child. What do you think are the most important steps communities can take to protect vulnerable children like Emily? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Please share in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring stories about heroes, both human and animal, who make a difference every day.